No, you're good. All right, we'll go ahead and start the committee meeting. Members should have a list of all the bills in front of them. We will start with Senate Bill number 2226, the Israeli Support Act of 2019. Senator Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is exactly like the title reads. It extends the repealer on the Israel Support Act for 4 years to 2028. There is a committee sub, and that was just to change some code sections that were brought forward were actually amended, and so it just also updated it from being a 1A, 1B without a 2 to just 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's an explanation of the bill and the committee sub.
Are there any questions? Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Johnson, this has been the law for 5 years. How's it been working? Has it been effective? Are there companies that have been affected by the law? What is it, if we extend a repealer, what's it been doing the past 5 years?
That's a wonderful question, and I'll be happy to get that information and get back with you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, for a motion.
Title sufficient, do pass committee sub.
Motion is title sufficient to pass committee sub. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. That bill will be reported out. Next, Senate Bill number 2228. Senator Michelle, you're recognized to explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee. You have before you Senate Bill 2228, which would allow a winery to direct ship wine to an individual. I've introduced this bill for several years, and there's two main reasons I've done it. One is because I've had a number of constituents come to me and ask me to introduce this legislation. They have been to another state or possibly to wine country where they have enjoyed a bottle of wine that they cannot buy in the state of Mississippi. And in the defense of the Department of Revenue, our ABC warehouse is limited on the amount of bottles that they can inventory. They cannot inventory the thousands of labels that are available out there. They typically inventory the biggest and best selling bottles of wine, and one of those is a $6 bottle of Mad Dog. That's one of the top sellers. And so that $6 bottle of Mad Dog is taking up space from a $30 bottle that could produce 4 to 5 times the revenue. Also, for 5 years, I've been on the subcommittee chairman on the Appropriations Committee that has handled the Department of Revenue budget. The budget is so large that we actually spend time in the months of November and December before we come into session to talk to the Department of Revenue about their budget. And one of the things that always comes up in our budget hearings is, give us an update on the new building you're going to build. And I'm mentioning this is because I want to give you an idea of the inventory that's handled in that warehouse. The warehouse is about 211,000 square feet, and about 60% of the floor area consists of wine, but it produces about 40% of the revenue. I handled this budget for 5 years, and you know that includes the COVID years. During the COVID years, the sales of spirits exploded in Mississippi, and they simply could not keep up with the demand. Our 50-year-old warehouse, y'all know we've been discussing having to make changes to it. This committee is going to be forced to make some decisions, and all of us in the Senate are going to be making some decisions on what size warehouse are we going to build. If we allow the direct shipment, that would take some of the burden off of this 60% of the floor space that the wine encompasses. I'm also aware that there's several initiative and referendum bills out there right now, and it's my personal opinion that if one of those passes, it will take Walmart and Kroger, with their hundreds of stores throughout Mississippi, about 30 days to pass an initiative and referendum to allow the sale of wine in grocery stores, which would also cut back on the amount of inventory that we have to have in our Gluckstadt warehouse. So we're going to be forced right now. The estimate is about $95 to $100 million to build that building. When I handled the agency budget 4 years ago, the estimate was $55 million. We have not even completed the plans. There's no telling what the cost. And I think these two decisions would be very important to have behind us before we begin construction on a warehouse where we could be saving $40, $50, $60 million on building a smaller warehouse than we actually need. I'll give you the details on the bill in section Two, it sets up the direct wine shipper permit, and it says it shall be directly for residents. Okay, this is to ship to residents, no commercial recipients. It allows the Department of Revenue to conduct any investigations they deem necessary. The wine shall be conspicuously labeled when it's delivered as alcohol, and it has to say on the box that signature of person 21 or older is required for delivery. There are prohibitions in this legislation. No more than 24 9-liter cases can be delivered to an individual. That's typically a 9-liter case is typically 12 bottles. They cannot ship to a dry county. A person at least 21 years of age must sign for shipment. That's true right now also for if you go on Kroger's direct ship platform and try to get beer delivered to your house, they will require someone 21 or older to sign for it, or they will not leave the product. It'll get back, sent back to the warehouse. Department of Revenue commissioners may adopt any rules necessary to implement the direct ship. Okay, we're going to let the Department of Revenue do whatever it takes necessary to make sure this program runs well. There's a fine of up to $1,000 or imprisonment up to 6 months on each shipment. It will create a separate offense. Okay, so if a shipper in California sends $200 bottles to someone, they've got $200 invested and they don't pay the tax to the Department of Revenue, they're subjected to as much as $1,000 fine per incident. So if they've done it 10, 15, 20 times, that $1,000 will accumulate. The Department of Revenue can suspend or revoke any permit for violations. So if we've got bad actors out there, the Department of Revenue can suspend their right to do business in Mississippi. All right, this is what everybody wants to talk about. This is the tax structure. In section 11, we have the direct ship tax set at the retail level. It comes from the winery and it's set at 15.5% tax. Now, all right, let me differentiate that from a bottle that's sold at your local bottle store. That bottle is shipped from a winery to our Department of Revenue. They store it in the warehouse. Of course, they have to have the staff to move it around the warehouse and get it to the retailer. But they mark it up 27.5%. And then the retailer, or the liquor store owner, is then able to add an additional profit on top of the 27.5%. And there's a 7% sales tax collected on that transaction as well. Now, I know there are going to be some questions about, are we getting less or are we getting more? Well, I'll tell you what, I ran about 10 different scenarios till my eyes glossed over on different dollar price points and also on markups. The markups will make a difference. If you have an expensive wine, it might be a triple markup. And therefore the tax is collected on the retail level. So it would be much greater than the wholesale level like it's taxed at the liquor store. So y'all are welcome to run your own calculations. I just told you how it's taxed, 15.5% on the retail price versus 27.5% on the wholesale price at the liquor store, plus the 7% sales tax. I'm aware of people who have club memberships because they want these good wines. They're going to the expense of getting a locker in another state. Let's say somebody across the state and here's the map right now. You'll see that Mississippi is one of 3 states that does not allow this to occur right now. So if someone wanted to get a great wine, $100 bottle, $70, $60 bottle that they like from California, shipped to Louisiana, they simply drive across the river and they have it stored in a locker, or they get it delivered to an office building or a warehouse. The state in that instance gets 0 taxes on it. Also, you've got the concern at that instance over the 21 or older. When we're shipping it directly to the person's house, and when they ship it to the house, they're going to ask for an ID and they're going to make a copy of that ID. And that's going to be part of the record that goes into the shipment, that proof that that person was over the age of 21. All right, nothing in this bill will prevent legislation that we passed a couple of years ago that would allow your local retailer to order the wine for you. You're still free to go into your local retailer and tell that retailer what bottle you'd like to order. That retailer, if he or she is willing to go to the extra trouble to order you 1 or 2 bottles, can do that for you. What they're probably going to find out, though, is that these boutique wines, or the more expensive wines that we can't inventory in Mississippi, they're going to require a membership. So it's probably not going to happen. I think the law that we've passed is being very seldomly used right now because of that membership requirement. Consumers in Mississippi are paying that membership fee. If they have a locker in another state, they're willing to pay for the locker, and they're also they've shown that they're willing to pay that extra fee to ship it from the locker to their house in Mississippi. So they're willing to pay the price, but we're collecting no revenue off of it in that instance. I have one constituent who told me that she opened her front door one day and there was a bottle of wine at her front door, and it had been shipped from out of state from a friend as a birthday present. Well, that bottle was not taxed in Mississippi. And also someone under the age of 21 could have easily gone out there and gotten that bottle of wine and opened it and consumed it. That's the safeguards we have in this legislation. So in Mississippi right now, your constituents can purchase marijuana, but you can't have a bottle of wine. We're one of 3 states that would not allow you to ship a bottle of wine directly to your house. And Mr. Chairman, I know there've been several questions planted among the group, and I'll be glad to be interrogated.
Well, it won't be a sniper attack. Senator Chasnoff.
I know how this
question.
works.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Senator Michelle. You know, I have a lot of respect for you, and I know that you are a good businessman because of your successful real estate business that you have had over the years in Jackson. I have heard from a number of independent package store owners that are terrified that this is the camel's nose under the tent to put them out of business. And since there's 700 or thereabouts number of independent package store owners in the state, it seems like they represent a good cross-section of our small businesses. The fact that they have called me in terror that they might be put out of business because of legislation such as this, I have to tell you that as much as I respect you and what you've brought before us today, I'm vehemently opposed to this and encourage the members of the committee not to vote for it.
Thank you. Senator Chasnoff, I have had a member of the committee also call me and tell me that he has run it by some of his stores. And the thing that they're really concerned about more than anything is this was his thought was Sunday sales. The liquor stores don't want to be forced to be open on a Sunday. That he felt like that these were wines that he can't get from the ABC warehouse anyway, is typically what we're going to be dealing with. And it would open up an opportunity for the consumers to get wines that he or she wouldn't be selling anyway.
You have a question?
Just a response to that, if I may.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
as I say, I have 5 counties in my district, and so we have a number of independent package stores in those 5 counties. And the overwhelming majority of the people that have contacted me have said, please do not let this happen, because they see it as the beginning of the end for their businesses. And I would really hate to put a number of independent small business owners out of work, and the people that work for them as well.
Thank you, Senator Chasnoff. Senator England for a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Michelle, this map that we have in front of us here, this is pertaining to your bill, is that right?
Yes.
And I'm assuming the blue states that we're looking at, those are states that have direct ship laws, is that right?
Yes, sir. There's a legend on there. It's supposed to be a legend on there. Yes, the blue ones are the ones who have the direct ship. The 3 in gray currently do not allow it, and the 2 in green have some sort of hybrid rulings that are different than direct ship or non-direct ship.
Okay, so the blue states that we're looking at, and look, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyways. I'm guessing they probably still have liquor stores in those states. Is that correct?
It's my understanding they all do. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Polk for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am not a plant. I've thought these 2 questions up on my own.
Good.
As their dumb question will sound.
Okay.
First, you mentioned in your narration and the explanation that you could not ship to a dry county.
That's correct.
If there is a wet city in that dry county, can you get it delivered to the city?
Oh, Lord. I tried to think through every question possible. It's my understanding that they can handle that by zip codes. It's my understanding that they would know the zip code is in the municipality where it could be possible. That's what I've been told. And
Okay, well,
and
my zip,
again, we've got our good friends, the Department of Revenue. They will be enforcing this. And let me mention something on that subject too. Former Commissioner Herb Frierson, about 7 or 8 years ago, heard about all the shipping that was going on in Mississippi. So they set up a sting operation. And it was so successful that they collected over $4 million in fines from wineries who are shipping in here. It'd be very simple to run a sting. All he's got to do is get his enforcement officers at night to get on the computer and try to order from one of these wineries and see what happens. And they had the goods on them that quick. And remember, the fine of $1,000 is per offense. If a enforcement officer contacts finds 10 different wineries in one night that are violating, that's 10 different violations.
Second question and last question. Will the driver of the vehicle that's delivering the wine have to be age 21 or older?
I don't see that in the legislation. I do not know that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Polk. And I would remind the committee that similar to the bill we passed last year that made the entire state wet for the purposes of transportation, if need be, we could look at possibly an amendment on the floor to make it for shipment of wine as well. Obviously, we can consider that. And also there is carrier reporting language that I think we talked about possibly adding as an amendment on the floor that we amended in the bill that is currently the law, or in the law that is current, that there is carrier reporting on shipping into the state that goes DR, so which would help cut down on some of the improper.
I'm for anything you think will improve the bill, Mr. Chairman.
We'll continue to work on it. Senator, who's next? Senator Blackman for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Michelle, my question is related to Section 5, Paragraph 2 on the amounts. And since you mentioned marijuana, I guess it's going to fold right into this. Marijuana is only medicinally approved and it's well regulated on the amounts that you can get a month, a week, and a year. I'm not very good at math, so bear with me, but so a 9-liter case, that's 12 bottles of wine, right?
But you said Section 5, Paragraph 2, right?
Yes, it's on page 4.
Okay. Paragraph 2 says, it doesn't mention that, I'm sorry. Line 98 maybe?
Yes.
Okay, B, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I'll tell you how much that is. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, 1 9-liter, that's 12 bottles.
Yes, sir. I
right?
mentioned that. Okay, a bottle is about 750 milliliters. That's three quarters of a liter. 3/4 times 12 is 9. That's 9 bottles. I'm sorry, that's 12 bottles. And that's where you come up with the 9 milliliters.
Okay, so 12 bottles is 1 9-milliliter case, and you can get 24. So one
Yes, sir.
individual can get 288 bottles of wine per year.
Is that what 24 times?
That's
12
what
is?
that's what my math is
Okay,
telling me.
yes, sir. That'd be right.
And so if you got another individual in your home, between the two of you, you can get 576 bottles of
Yes, sir.
wine a year.
Yes, sir. It's per individual, as long as they're over the age of 21.
So these other states that have it, are they allowing 288 bottles per person a year?
That's right. I didn't look at every state's regulations. The idea would be if you've got some people who are collectors and have wine cellars, and they might want them for the cellar, you know, it doesn't mean they have to drink that amount, but I don't know the amount in all the other states.
So would you be open to lowering that amount so as to not drive out these local alcohol sellers? Because 288 bottles, you'd have no reason to go to any local liquor store.
Leave it up to committee's wishes, Senator.
All right, thank you.
Some people like firewater too.
Thank you, Senator Blackman. Any other questions? Senator Suber for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
I want to go back to a comment you were talking about a minute ago with the dry counties. I like Senator Chasnoff represent 5 counties, and I think 4 of them are dry, but they all have a city. Like just Calhoun County, Pittsburgh is the only city that actually allows liquor. And I have a Pittsburgh zip code and I live 5 miles from town. So, I mean, how would they differentiate some of these houses that aren't anywhere near the city limits?
Senator Hobson, did what you say address that about what y'all passed last year?
I mean, I go back to the.
I mean,
Yeah, that's okay. I go back to the bill that we passed a few years ago, that the current law that makes it the entire state wet for the purposes of transportation, for transporting liquor across the state. So if you were going from Jackson to Oxford, Jackson to Starkville, Jackson to the coast, and you go through a dry county and get pulled over, you're not in violation of the law, whereas you were before. So we can look at potentially working with some folks before we take it up on the floor to make it to where, for the purposes of shipment, the entire state is wet. That way you don't have issues with zip codes and cities and outside of city, but got a city zip code or,
Well, I just wouldn't want, my neighbor to get a ticket or be arrested for receiving a bottle of wine at her house, even though,
We
as
wouldn't
far
either.
fetched as that is, just the possibility.
well, that's what I think we can work on, trying to get some language to satisfy that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions on the bill? All right. Seeing no further questions okay. 1 second, Senator Blackman has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Michelle, I'm looking at line 342 and it starts at 341 through 344. It's in regard to the late fee for failing to timely file and pay the taxes. How was the $50 amount? How did that come about?
that's as extra incentive for the Department of Revenue to get them to comply.
$50 is the extra incentive to do that. Well, I'm trying to see, how did we decide on $50, or how did the $50 amount come out?
I'd be glad if you want to amend that, that'd be fine.
Oh, thank you.
Senator Blackman does also say, in addition to any other penalty authorized by this article. So I don't know if our friends at DOR may have authority to. We'll have to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to read it to find all of it.
Sure. All right. Any other questions on the bill? All right, Senator Sparks for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
The taxation is at 15.5% on the retail dollar. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. The price that the winery charges the consumer, the individual, is 15.5% on that cost, the retail cost.
All right, and then is there also the 7% sales
No.
tax? Not at all.
That's the point of collection. I asked the question about, would we be dealing with the use tax if it were, it'd be almost like buying something on Amazon. And this legislature dubbed those taxes use taxes many years ago, and it goes into a different fund. But all this money will go to the state general fund. It's not diverted in any manner like use taxes are.
But if I buy something on Amazon, I have to pay 7% sales tax, do I not?
Yes, sir.
And if I buy
Well, that's a use tax.
Well, it's a tax.
Yes, sir.
And it happens to mirror our sales tax number.
I'm sorry?
It's 7%, correct?
Yeah, well, the idea is that this was built in, the 15.5% is the total tax, because it all goes straight to the general fund, to the Department of Revenue.
Right. I just want to make sure we're buying online. We had a lot of legislation that led us to tax online purchases. If I buy used whatever on Amazon, not Amazon, but eBay, I'm supposed to pay a tax. 7% is the tax that's collected. And if I buy a bottle of wine in a liquor store, I'm going to pay 7%, correct?
Yes.
So all we're collecting for the state of Mississippi is 15.5 cents on the retail
Yes.
cost. And that is going to be remitted by an out-of-state entity to our Department of Revenue.
Yes.
Okay. And I guess other states have done this. I guess, ask this question to DOR afterwards. I just want to, goes back kind of Senator Blackman's question as well. If we're collecting taxes, but technically we're relying on an out-of-state entity, And we're putting a $50 fine if they pay late, and it doesn't even say how late is. So 5 years later, it's $50. I'm 30 days late. So I do think we need to tighten up language of when they need to file and pay these taxes.
Well, they are remitting it monthly. They're to remit it by the 20th day of the next month after the sale occurs. That's similar to sales tax, where the sales tax statutes work.
Right,
But you're right, the fine could be improved. Yes, sir. But there is a schedule for when they're supposed to be remitting it.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sparks. And I think, Senator Sparks, to your question on line 400, it starts talking about taxes, and there's actually 3% that goes to mental health program fund, and then the rest goes to the general fund, my understanding of the 15.5%. So any other questions for Senator Michelle? All right, seeing none, for a motion. Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Division is requested. All those in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. The noes have it. All right. Next bill, Senate Bill number 2248. Senator Bryan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a local and private bill which would allow the city of Amory to enact a 3% hotel motel restaurant tax. It is identical to legislation that a number of other municipalities have. I appreciate the chair and the chair of local and private taking this up early in the session. After the tornado, there's a concern for particularly reconstructing and improving parks in town. And the people back home have asked me to get this enacted as soon as possible. So they're anxious to schedule an election. That's what the bill does. That's the reason it's here on the agenda at this time. And I appreciate very much the chair's willingness and the willingness of the chair of local and private to help. If there are no questions, I move title sufficient to pass.
And there is an election process on this as well.
Yes, there is an existing law on the books. The existing law on the books has expired because the 5-year period went out. This is, for all practical purposes, starting all over again with a brand new local and private with all the standard provisions about elections and the scope of the tax and all of that.
Okay. Are there any questions for Senator Bryan? Seeing none, for a motion?
I move title sufficient to pass.
Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Next is Senate Bill 2304, Senator Fillingane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 2304 is a request of the Mississippi Department of Human Services. It allows them to recoup SNAP and child care overpayments through state tax refunds. Their recovery unit's responsible for establishing, monitoring, tracking any overpayment recoveries for DHS, such as SNAP and child care. And in preparing for this, I asked them, I was kind of thinking it was maybe like child support, but they told me no, that there are instances where people either by mistake, mistakes happen and people get overpaid for SNAP or child care vouchers for their kids' daycare. Those two programs. And then there are also instances, unfortunately, where people, misrepresent what their income might be, or maybe they start out being qualified, but then they get, a different job or extra hours, and then their income increases such that they're no longer eligible. And it sometimes takes a while for that to catch up. And as a result of that, sometimes overpayments are made. So their recovery unit detects an average of around 300 overpayment cases each month. And so this would allow, in those instances, in the event that the overpayment was in excess of $125, that this bill would allow any state refunds to be intercepted and the overpayments recouped by the State Department of Human Services. That's what the bill does. I do have an amendment because after it was originally drafted, Department of Revenue looked over it and they had a little tweaking to the definition that they wanted done in the bill. So I'll be glad to answer any questions or offer the amendment, whichever the chair would deem most appropriate in whatever order.
Are there any questions on the bill from anyone? Senator Simmons for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and maybe the attorneys can probably help us with this. I know last year we had a taxpayer debt set off for hospitals. And if this becomes law, it's another one. Do we know at this point how many currently, how many tax debt set offs do we have in the law right now?
Jan, you have that? Would you like to come up here and not to put you on the spot? This wasn't a plant.
I'm like Senator Polk. I thought about this one on my own.
I was trying to text it and I didn't get it in time. I'm sorry. We currently have 21 offsets for individual income tax. And so last year we had $12 million that was offset to the other programs. Number of them are universities for student loan debt. The two largest are for MDES and then for child support.
Okay. And so now we've been doing for our county hospitals for about a year because we passed that last year. How is that working?
That number I don't have, if we
Okay.
have any that have been paid, because I was looking at our FY23 numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Philligan for your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the amendment would be amending lines 24 through 30 and inserting in lieu thereof the following: debt means any sum due and owing the claimant agency for any overpayment under the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the Temporary Assistance to Needy Families Program, and the Child Care and Development Fund Program. So they just want to be very specific about which programs they're talking about.
Okay. Y'all heard the amendment. Are there any questions on the amendment? All right, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it.
If there are no other questions, I would move title sufficient due pass committee substitute.
All right. You heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Senator Philligan. Next, Senate Bill 2320, Senator Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What 2320 does, it says that no tag or decal shall be issued or renewed under this chapter unless the owner or operator of the motor vehicle first presents proof of coverage by a motor vehicle liability policy. And that's an explanation of the bill.
All right. You've heard an explanation of the bill. Are there any questions? No questions for a motion. Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Next is Senate Bill 2476. This bill is extending the repealer for qualified charitable organizations and qualified foster care charitable organizations for donations. It extends the repealer out to 2029. And that is basically saying how you can donate a portion of your income tax and a portion of your ad valorem tax, up to 50% of your ad valorem tax for donation to those two different entities. Are there any questions on the bill? Motion is title sufficient to do pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Next is Senate Bill 2477. This extends the repealer on the tax credit for railroad expenditures Short line railroads. This is just extending it to 2028. Senator Bryan for a question.
You said short line railroads. This is, I think I saw something, I looked at the bill hurriedly, class 2 and class 3 railroads. So those are
Yes, correct.
basically short lines. So it would not apply to that foreign railroad the railroad that's owned by the foreign entities.
No, not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions? Seeing none for a motion. The motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion rise and report. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Ayes have it.